Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast for NFL Week 13. A lot of bye weeks. It's almost a fantasy football playoffs. A lot to get to here. Start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast for NFL Week 13. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Mario, we're on to Week 13. A lot of teams are on bye. A lot of important teams are on bye as well. So that sets up for some tough lineup decisions for a lot of fantasy managers to be making for this week. Basically, when I finished up best ball season, all my drafts, I knew that Week 13 was going to be a sticky one because, it's close to the playoff time, and I know that I had a lot of exposure to Bills, Ravens, Vikings. So this is going to be a hairy one.
Yeah, were we down the Colts? No, the Colts are still good. I was like, I also took a lot of Jonathan Taylor, so I assume if he hadn't been hurt, he'd be on bye this week anyway. But yeah, it's a lot of parts this week that you didn't have to wade into last week.
Yep. So we're gonna sort it out for y'all. We're gonna start things out with the Thursday night football game. We've got the Dallas Cowboys playing host to the Seattle Seahawks. The Cowboys 8.5-point favorites in this one against the Seahawks. We all know that the Cowboys have been rocking out really of late. It's been an impressive run from them. They've been nails at home in particular. And so that, we've got Deron Bland running back, all the pick sixes in the world. And Seattle, I think for their part, oh boy, it's starting to crumble a little bit, the foundation. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the market for a new quarterback this time, or not this time next year, but for next season. Can the Seahawks even keep this moderately respectable? This is one of the few occasions where the schedule makers have made both Thursday night football teams on equal rest.
Yeah, it just seems like there's too many key injuries with the Seahawks for them to be the team that they, envisioned when they were making the moves that they did this offseason, when they were building the team the way they did. It's a lot to deal with, especially when you have to deal with this Dallas defense. So I don't know how much this might change over the last month with Abe Lucas getting back from injury, but largely the story with the Seahawks in the games they've struggled this year, the story's largely been they're not able to pass block, and I would wonder too if maybe the run blocking has suffered a little bit. Both tackles missed a lot of time, Lucas more than Cross, and then the guard Damian Lewis was missing a bunch of time too. So that stuff, I think, particularly in the games where the Seahawks had difficult matchups, which last week definitely was. It's a bad enough setup even before you get to the elbow injury that Gino's dealing with. So those complications made the Seahawks pretty harmless looking against the 49ers. And I'm, for their sake, worried that, the Dallas game is going to have maybe a similar sort of outcome where it's just, this was looking like a buzzsaw matchup for you anyway, and then when you throw in the additional difficulties, it just isn't really. It's not like a seriously competitive game. So
no, I don't see it as a competitive game. I mean, when they opened the line for this one all the way back in May, Cowboys 3.5-point favorites. Now we're looking at 9.5, and I think that's pretty accurate depiction on the direction that both teams have gone in. Your thoughts on Zach Charbonnet for tonight, because it doesn't look great for Kenneth Walker, but again, a very tough matchup. So I fear similar results to last week against San Francisco.
Right. It was a difficult situation last week, and this week, nothing obviously better about it. I do wonder if there's a chance, given how many routes he's being left with as a passing down back and how many targets he's been getting, maybe Charbonnet at one of these days is going to luck into an actually viable set of targets. Like a lot of these targets are just kind of, the play falling apart and the ball just getting dumped off to somebody before the quarterback gets taken down. So Charbonnet, I don't think is getting like a fair shot with these targets basically to this point. Like if someone were to look at his targets, the lack of yardage returns with them and speculate, oh, he's doing a bad job as a pass catcher. I don't really see that. I see it as, structural limitations of the team holding him into that kind of area. And even so, the problem here is why would any of that change for the better? It's just at best, it would have to wait for another week, it seems like to me. I mean, for the Seahawks to make this a competitive game, they just have to make it a really low scoring game, I think.
Yeah, they can't keep up it in a track meet, I don't think. The pass rush too lively for Dallas. So somehow they're going to need Dak Prescott to turn into the Dak of last year, where he's turning the ball over too much. But I don't see any signs of Dak slowing down. I've seen him start to enter the MVP conversation, and then I don't really find that Jalen Hurts or Patrick Mahomes are playing at such a level where they are locks to win it. So I feel like if Prescott continues this the rest of the way, and if the Cowboys are able to somehow steal the NFC East, that's looking less and less likely by the week. But if they're able to really, manage this gauntlet and Dak plays at this level, like I wouldn't hate the idea of him being in the MVP conversation at the very least.
I totally agree. I mean, it's amazing how far he's come since that really bad 49ers game. Admittedly, a lot of these are easier matchups. Washington's a pushover. The Giants, the few parts of their defense that are functional were kind of just like swept away in the tide of everything else going on in that game. The Eagles' defense is not in the secondary anyway, is not nearly what it has been in the last couple of years. So on the one hand, I do think Dak kind of needed to get rolling here, but it's been kind of a laugher. Even that Carolina game where his numbers didn't look that good, I think he was kind of doing better, than the numbers looked in that one too. So I think it's on the one hand, like the biggest test he's seen in at least a month with this Seattle defense. It's a weird defense, but there's some firepower there. They've got some players at all levels that can do some things of whatever sort. I don't think they're going to be like. I will say actually, Dak needs to be a little careful here because a guy like Witherspoon is obviously looking to jump routes, and they got some pass rushers, and Dak I think will always be a little bit turnover prone-ish, just slightly more than average, because in large part he does take those risks. But yeah, the Seahawks will. The danger in the Seahawks is that they're just not going to quit. They're not going to come out and be like sad for themselves and mopey about how they're overmatched. Like they're just never going to play that way. And for that reason, Dak just needs to make sure not to turn it over too much.
Yep, that will be the key tonight. But if he plays the way that he has been and not turning it over, I think that Dallas wins this one.
Yeah,
going away, and we're surprised at the end of it that the line was only 9 points. Let's get on over to Sunday. We've got the Chargers and the Patriots. Ugh. What do we do about this one? I believe the Patriots just lost to Tommy DeVito, and the Chargers can't get out of their own way.
Yeah. So it's been quite a ride with the Patriots offense, obviously, and going back a couple of years now with the whole Mac Jones thing. It's pretty crazy how kind of damaged he must be at this point. I do think you can at once be a general Mac Jones critic and also concede like, yeah, he's kind of shook and he's not functioning basically at this point. He's just glitching on things that he normally didn't struggle with in the past, and it's just I think dealing with so many snaps of the defense kind of teeing off against you, your offensive line, a combination of bad and injured, your receivers, a combination of really, really bad or injured, and specifically the complete lack of speed in that offense at a time when the offensive line couldn't block it all in the passing game. It's like that's just like it's truly just being just tossed to the defense, and I think it's kind of rattled his brain and he can't play the way he used to, basically. So they kind of almost needed to bench Mac Jones for his own safety, before he gets like a permanent case of the yips, and maybe it's already too late for all I know. But one thing that's not going to help is switching quarterbacks, not for the results anyway. It helps, it gives Mac Jones that shelter that he really badly needs right now. But the Patriots just cannot play NFL football right now. It's just, even the defense, as far as what they could have had going there, they no longer can. Just too many injuries, too many really brutal injuries. So the Chargers are a joke of a team, but man, if they lost this one, I'd be pretty shocked.
I think so too, but where are you at 5.5 points in Foxborough that the Chargers would have to cover?
Yeah, at the very least, they would the Patriots would need to kind of I think keep the game under something like 30 total points, which it could happen. It is as simple, I think, as if you keep Keenan Allen under 80 yards, you're keeping Herbert under 200. But I don't know. I think the Patriots don't really have the personnel to deal with Allen. Certainly not at corner. I know Duggar is such a big part of their tight end coverage. I know he's not he's not that often like one-on-one specifically. So, but with that said, like guys like Miles Bryant against Keenan Allen is such a laugher. I can hardly think of that many, maybe like 5 corners in the league who Keenan Allen would have an easier time against than Miles Bryant. And the Patriots kind of have to keep rolling him. I guess they could put Jonathan Jones in the slot on Keenan Allen, but then Keenan Allen just, probably bullies him because he's so much bigger. So I think the Chargers should be okay. It's just gonna be one of those games where it's, the team that won because the team that lost was so bad. And you can tell it's like these guys aren't really dictating the game. They're not really they're not playing so well that they're dictating the course of the game. It's just, it's an open net.
Yeah, it's I think on the Keenan Allen detail, obviously watched him pretty closely last Sunday night in particular. He was automatic, completely. I think he was 13 out of 15 on his targets.
For how they were gunning for him too. To not miss any of those 14 targets is so crazy.
So he's automatic, and like you said, he gets an even softer matchup this week. We'll see if the Chargers even entertain the idea of widening the target distribution a little bit. But that seems like if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of dealio.
Also, they can't fix it
right
so
now.
They can't fix it. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. True, but when you can't fix it, stop screwing it up and making it worse. Also, even if it is broke.
Yeah, because otherwise, the other options not overly appealing. What do you make of Austin Eckler right now?
I don't know the most recent status of him, but 2 weeks ago, that game, he was clearly not healthy. He was clearly running like a 4.7. He was running like a Elijah Holyfield 40 at 190 pounds, which is not good. You want to be fast. If you're going to be that slow, you better be a tank. And Eckler's game, of course, is not power. It never has been. It's always been about the burst, the hard running, the jukes. But he can't really do that, especially because they just have some brutal matchups in the run game, I think. So what is usually the case with the Chargers is that no one's running the ball because it's almost impossible to. It's the offense isn't built well enough to do it. The question is is there pass catching production available against the Ravens? That's a tough matchup. They didn't leave a whole lot there. The game's more like the Bears, 7 catches for 94 yards on a touchdown. That's kind of the Eckler you thought you were buying in the first round the last couple of years. Even if it came with a decline in rushing production. But with the problem right now, I think, is we're getting a lot of cases where the run game is denied for whatever reason, structural or matchup reason. It's not there. And then also the pass catching isn't there, in large part because the offense is just too it's too usage predictable. It's always just going to be, especially after the Mike Williams injury, you always knew it's Keenan Allen and it's Austin Eckler. In a lot of ways, it's I don't think defenses could scheme more against Austin Eckler right now than if they tried to scheme more against him, it would be impossible. They have so much surplus resources laying around, because it's like most offenses you have to go back and as a defensive coordinator and think like, okay, how are we gonna deal with these 3 or 4 guys? How are we gonna account for the threat of like the off tackle run after we deal with all of that? And then against the Chargers, it's just where's Allen, where's Eckler? Play ball. That's it. That's all you really need.
Yeah, the lack of depth, the lack of development from Quentin Johnston, obviously Mike Williams injury, it has thrown that offense into just a level of predictability and easiness to scheme against that's almost impressive. But they still almost won on Sunday night somehow. But I think they'll be able to take care of business in this spot.
They always do this. It's always got to be Alex Erickson or Jason Moore or Michael Bandy. They can't go get like. There's got to be someone who was like an all-conference mention, an all honorable mention, all-conference pick at their college level. And it's like they always go signing these guys who are just like the lowest of the low prospects. It's crazy.
Yep, it's like, hey, can we interest you in a lightly used Stone Smart?
Who was bad 4 years ago? Alex Erickson. That's who I was thinking of. Go sign him. Yeah, that's great.
Bring him on. All right, before we get on to our next game, we have a message from our friends over at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with daybeds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bars, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss the legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game parties only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. We also got a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. Okay. All right. Let's move on. We do have a question about one Tim Boyle, Mario. And, well, with all of the bye weeks this week, is he potentially on the radar in 2 QB leagues?
Oh, my God.
They are playing the Falcons.
Okay. Well, I don't even know what I think about the Falcons defense. They're not terrible. They have like a couple good players, and then they're not really obviously terrible at most levels. They just kind of aren't good either. Let's see. So 179 yards, 9.4 fantasy points. I don't know, man. So did that thing say 2 quarterback or super flex? I guess if it's like 2 quarterback, I guess you kind of just have to play 2 quarterbacks sometimes.
Yeah,
or whatever.
super flex.
Super flex. I don't know, man. I don't know if I can do it. You'd have to be, I think, choosing between some really poor skill position players, because I don't know if I can trust Tim Boyle to get to 10. I don't know if I can trust him to start the second half of that game. You know, like they have Trevor Siemian there, who's also incredibly bad, but also clearly better than Boyle. So if they don't have Siemian ready to go, I think it's just because it's like they're trying to get him up to speed. I almost wonder, like, are they at this point kind of thinking like we got to get Siemian ready to go because Boyle's just gonna make us all, too depressed to show up for work the next day. I don't know, man. I can't. I don't think I can say start Boyle. I don't think I can do it.
Okay, let's not. And he does, for the record, fall outside of our top 24 in quarterback rankings for this week. So, wash our hands of it. Like he's outside of our starting range. We said as much in 12 teams.
Tim Boyle, don't make me look like an idiot on this one. Please just be who you are, who you've always been.
Yeah, stay true to yourself, Timmy. It's all going to work out. Let's move on to that game. In fact, Falcons Jets. Falcons 2.5 point favorites on the road at the Meadowlands, hoping for no injuries in this one. That field seems like it's among the most cursed that we've seen. But beyond that, your thoughts on the Falcons' performance last week, coming off of their bye, beaten up pretty good, I thought, on the Saints, and what it might mean this week for their trip up to New York.
Well, this is a dangerous spot for the Falcons just because anytime they go against a defense this dangerous, like the kind of defense that will make turnovers happen and won't give you anything in the ground game, they're the kind of defense that I don't know if you can hide Ritter, and even if you did,
Mhm.
the Jets have enough run stopping capacity that they can kind of turn the Bijan and Algier thing to less than 60 yards on the ground or something like that. And if you have the ball anyway while running so little as that, and then Ritter is the quarterback, you're at some point necessarily going to start throwing the ball with like 3rd and 10 or more. And against this defense, I think Ritter's of a level of vulnerability where you can't hide him unless you're just kind of not even trying to move the ball. And I don't think the Falcons are going to do that. So as much as the Jets quarterback is clearly worse, like a lot worse than Ritter, I know I just said Ritter's not very good. Boyle is so much worse than Ritter, but I still have to say that the Jets defense is almost like a bigger threat to score than either offense in this game. And if they're on one of their tears, uh, yeah, that's how I guess the Jets could get a win there. But if it comes down to throwing for more yardage than the other team or something, then yeah, that's a challenge that the Jets, almost regardless of who they're playing, regardless how bad the defense is, it's almost just impossible. They need the defense and the run game to do it.
Yeah, that's been the case for them all year. I start to wonder if that defense is just tired of it
It
at a
could
certain point.
be.
Like, how do they
I don't
keep
have a
playing
good
that
sense
hard?
on. I don't have a good sense on if defenses sometimes get gassed over the course of the year. I feel like they generally reset after a given game, with exceptions of like they played 95 snaps on Sunday and now they got a Thursday game. Like that would be a case where I'm like, okay, those guys are going to be gassed still. But if they're not like injured and they're not getting gassed in the game in question, I feel like the Jets they've kind of got that culture by now where they're always gonna, even when they're not even when things aren't going well, like they're gonna be so pissed off they'll just kind of always be difficult to play against.
Yeah, and that's been true. The defense still is playing hard for sure, but I wonder about the human level tipping point. But maybe that's the wrong application of that, and that they'll keep playing hard no matter uh, how bad the record
Like
seems
they'll get
to
mad at
suggest.
Tim Boyle, they'll curse Tim Boyle, but then they'll go punch a guy on offense on the other team about it.
Yeah, exactly. So well said there. What did you make of Drake London's performance last week? And is he someone that is a good or a bad matchup going up against someone like Sauce Gardner?
Uh that's tough for me to answer because I'm a lot higher on Drake London than most people, even though I understand perfectly well that most people are some version of quite high on London. I think he's like a clear all pro receiver waiting to happen, even if the numbers aren't obvious right now. I have zero doubt about that at all. So at some point in time, I expect London to be able to beat pretty much any corner in the league, Sauce Gardner included. And part of the problem here too is I think Gardner's maybe a little overrated. I I think he's a really good like cover 3 corner, but I think the category of cornerback that can play one-on-one against London in man coverage is one too exclusive to have room for Gardner, in my opinion. What makes Gardner tough to beat, and even DJ Reed tough to beat, is you don't get to just get a crack at them one-on-one, right? You're as a receiver going against the Jets, you have to beat that whole defense because they really do work in concert, and they work
Mhm.
um, they work with principles more complicated than just like line up and beat the guy ahead of you. So between the pass rush, between the varying coverages, but the safeties getting involved, uh, I think it's just tough for a quarterback like Ritter to throw the ball on a defense like that, almost no matter who he has at receiver. I think London can probably beat Gardner. I just don't know if he's going to get targets that he can actually work with. I worry that it's going to maybe look a little bit like the guy on the other side, Garrett Wilson, dusting people every week, and the ball's just, it's not even in frame. They have to pan out.
Yeah, it's funny how Garrett Wilson, I would characterize this year as being like a lunch pail fantasy asset. Like he's someone that you drafted to be a total stud, someone that is someone that maybe takes your team over the top. It's more just like, boy, that was a hard-earned 12 points. Good for you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, he gets 1 point per target, basically.
Yeah, it's been tough for him. Obviously, you're still starting him, and you're probably still starting London, even if it's a tough matchup. I think he's high-end wide receiver 3 type of guy for this week. Let's keep rolling here. We've got the Lions and the Saints coming up. We've got the Saints 4.5-point dogs at home. Is something wrong with the Lions? Maybe you've been kind of squatting on this one for a little bit as to whether they were actually as good as some of their biggest hype men said they were.
Well, I thought that the Lions were a little overrated, and certainly Jared Goff. I think it's so annoying, man. Like half of the year, every year, we have a pretty sensible Jared Goff opinion, in the world, in the fantasy media scene, football media scene. But then he'll have his 4 good games a year, and each time he does, we have to hear from these people who are like, "Oh, he's a top 5 quarterback." We said so. We said so for years. We said that the Stafford trade was a bad idea. We knew the Stafford trade was bad for the Rams and good for the Lions. This proves it. He is never going to be a quarterback who carries an offense, which is fine. It's not even how the Lions are built. They don't need that kind of quarterback to be the kind of team that they're trying to be. But as we've also seen, Goff is just bad enough that even when everything is kind of in his favor, and even when he's going against weak defenses at home, he can kind of still screw it up a little bit. And they were lucky to get the win against the Bears. They were, they weren't awful exactly against the Packers, but Goff needs to play better in that game because the Lions' pass defense isn't very good, especially by playoff standards. So we knew those Detroit corners couldn't really cover, against size speed. The Packers had that. Love, for whatever reason, was playing pretty well, and Goff just kind of dug a deep hole early in the game, and I guess he almost brought them back, but I don't know that when they're those almost comebacks like that where you need more than a field goal but you can't get it. I don't know. I think it might have been just the defense playing bend but don't break and trying harder not to break at one particular point. The last one basically. So Goff really did there's signal to the way that Goff failed the last 2 weeks and the effect that the way that it dragged down the Lions. That's an ongoing concern, but I don't think he's likely to just fall off a cliff now. I think it was, even as a Goff critic, I have to admit he was he'll do better the next time around in the same scenario. He's not going to struggle this bad against the Bears and Packers at home the next time you do it. So the Saints, by contrast, I think are just complete frauds, and it's not the players' fault. Derek Carr aside, it is Derek Carr's fault as far as players go. But the coaches, the front office, the people who are in charge there, they've totally screwed it up. They've made it a rotten. It's like they're as a team, they're just insolvent. It's crazy the cap situation that they're in and how much money they owe Derek Carr that they can't get out of. And it's as simple as almost all the time, if Derek Carr is the quarterback, this offense is not going to be able to run, and the defense is getting kind of hanged out to dry. So I do think the Saints have a lot of talent, maybe even more than the Lions have, but the Lions are clearly the better team. And if this is even a close game, I'd be surprised. I feel like the Lions should kind of, in the second half anyway, at least pull away in this one.
I don't know why, but I have an unwavering faith in the Saints I don't know why. And I also feel like the Lions could lose this one. I don't know. I feel like that I don't trust them on the road quite as much. And they've, again, to your point, they've been bad at home over these last couple of weeks. So now they got to take their show on the road. They this is a huge spot for them. If they slip up here, all of a sudden with the way that the Packers have been playing of late, maybe the cakewalk to the NFC North crown gets a little bit dicier. They are 4-1 against the spread on the road this year, however, so maybe you are right and well-founded, and the Saints are just that rotted to where the Lions can get it done. But I'm still a little bit skeptical on the Lions overall going forward with this nucleus. Let's move on over. We got Cardinals, Steelers. We got the Steelers, 5.5-point favorites. Steelers obviously made some headlines last week with the offense looking better post Matt Canada, but was that a function of the Bengals defense just being on the field all day and also not being that good to begin with? Or was there some sort of like tangible change that was made in that offense that, kind of caught your attention? I noticed that Pat Freiermuth, for example, drawing the 11 targets, catching 9 of them, going over 100 yards, like that was new. Obviously, he's been hurt for a good bit of this year, but even still, does that start to be more of a staple here? Is that how they get this offense going?
It seemed to me that the Freiermuth plays were largely like uncovered post routes off of play action down the middle of the field. And they were so open that it was one of those things. It's like whoever was running that would have had those same plays. However, I do wonder if that opening being there at all was a result of Freiermuth being so inactive to that point. Like maybe Anarumo just kind of overlooked the play threat because, before that week, they just basically weren't running it. So if it was Canada just being kind of negligent in not running that previously, and if that is an explanation for part of why Freiermuth had been so unproductive to this point, that definitely would be something that reflects poorly on Canada and would be basis for projecting, improvement with Kenny Pickett going forward. The one thing that I don't know is, you were kind of getting at it, like, is this Bengals defense any good? And they're underachieving. They have some amount of talent. I can't tell for sure though how much their underachievement is them, truly being bad or whatever, or getting beat, but just, one of those things where maybe you have to give more so credit to the other team. So in this case, I don't know how much credit I got to give Kenny Pickett, but it's worth keeping in mind that, those Freiermuth targets were largely uncovered. There were good throws down the sideline that Pickett was making in this game to like Deontay Johnson early on, especially, but that is a play that the Bengals are probably a lot better at covering almost any other week because they were without Cam Taylor-Britt, who has been a pretty good outside corner for them. And Chidobe Awuzie, he's still probably not 100% from last year's ACL tear. So they've had this rookie DJ Turner from Michigan, who's probably a pretty good prospect. I mean, he's certainly really fast and stuff, but he's been kind of getting beat on in these games that they've had to put him out there. And I wonder if the Bengals kind of just have a problem right there right now. Like if basically like they have some kind of plan and it's getting kind of screwed up because one of their corners basically isn't ready to play right now. But if it's not explained by Turner's struggles or the Bengals just having some other excuse, then last week was the first time the Panthers showed any ability, the Steelers showed any ability to approach like 300 yards passing in a game. It was always bouncing between like 160 and 210 for that first 12 weeks or 11 weeks or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so something looked different, but I think this is a type of matchup that kind of will inform us as to whether that was a Bengals issue or that was actually the start of something for the Steelers offense. Getting the Cardinals at home, though, I mean, it seems like it sets up pretty well.
Cardinals defense is really, really bad, and it's kind of by design. Like they know they had to rebuild the whole team. They know they can't rebuild every part at once. So they went in knowing that they were kind of doing like a not tanking exactly, like they had to go down this route one way or another, but they made the painful choice to go into this year with just no defensive personnel hardly. So with the Steelers, their offense, I think, still being based on the run game, this should be a favorable setup for them because the passing should occur in favorable situations and the run game should be kind of just like red hot. Like I know, Kyron Williams has more than half of his rushing yards this year against just the Cardinals.
Yeah.
And I think that Harris and Warren, I don't know, there's probably going to be a day down the line where they both have 100 yards in a game. I don't know why it wouldn't be this one if it is ever going to happen.
Yeah, the Cardinals can't stop this type of run game. I think the Steelers' offensive line might be getting a little bit better as it gels over the course of the season. So I can absolutely see that potentially unfolding. What do you do with the likes of Deontay Johnson and George Pickens at this point? Are you still starting them, or are they still like mostly okay?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Freiermuth is going to get over 80 yards again this year. Like, he doesn't need to. He can do quite well just doing, the 6 or 7 catches for 70 or 80 yards kind of thing. If he has something more along that line and Pickett is still throwing with a similar volume as last week, then Pickens, I think especially, has more room carved out to do something in that case. But the reason, at least for this week, I would have a lot of trouble benching either of Pickens or Johnson, because the Cardinals, I know you're just saying they have probably the worst run defense. They almost definitely have the worst pass defense. So in a way, it's possible that the run defense is so bad, to the extent that it is this particularly bad. It might be in part because they're playing kind of off the point of attack a little bit, giving these corners more help downfield. Like, if you're the Cardinals and you want to play 10 men in the box, you're giving up a big pass play. Like, it's that automatic. So they can't even like sell out to stop a part of an offense if they want to. If they went into this game with their goal being, we can't let George Pickens catch 5 passes, they would be totally helpless at actually dictating that.
That is true. They are damned if they do, damned if they don't type of deal. On the Arizona side, is Kyler Murray startable in this setup? Going on the road.
I hate it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Doesn't this feel like a bad one for? I also hate I know it's dictated by injuries. It's not the plan exactly, but the idea of an offense where your 3 lead receivers average like 162 pounds and none of them is 5'9" is just it's one of those. I almost just like faint at the thought of it, and I can't. That could just be me, being whatever, just precious or whatever. But I think there's some sort of, if it's not actually dangerous or wrong for some reason, then it is like, if it's like a moral wrong. Like, there's something just infernal about having 3 receivers that tiny. It's
like, do they think that Kyler can only like relate to receivers roughly his size? It's like, that's how he'll be comfortable.
Dude, if you're taller than him, he won't throw to you.
He's out.
Maybe that is what it is. I don't know, but yeah, I think so. It was because of Michael Wilson's injury that Dortch got on the field. It really was not the plan to have these 3 guys on the field at the same time. And Brown is a rental. They know that. They know they're letting him walk this offseason anyway. So it was not the plan at any point to have this outcome occur. But again, Dortch is like 5'7", 170. Moore is 5'7", 180. Brown is like 5'9", 160 or something. I don't know. Against the Steelers too, that's another part of it. The tiniest receivers of all time against the Steelers, like one of like kind of like the dirtiest and most in your face defenses. It's literally their identity. Every single any era of the Steelers you look at, they have the same aesthetic, the same bit, and it's basically like, we hurt the other players who try to throw the ball against us.
And I think it's telling. It doesn't always say the whole story, but I think it can be an interesting baseline when you're making your lineup decisions, what a player's given props are. And Kyler Murray's passing yardage prop is 215.5. You know who has a higher passing yardage prop? Jake Browning.
I wasn't expecting that. I was ready for Kenny Pickett. I wasn't ready for Jake Browning.
Yeah, right. So Kenny Pickett's slightly less than that. Like the books are not buying. The books are not buying Pickett. They have him at like 199.5.
Honestly, I would take Pickett to have more passing yards in this game. I'm worried it's going to be one of those times where it's just one of the teams gets just kind of ragdolled, kind of start to finish, I can imagine Murray sitting in like the fourth quarter just to protect him, basically physically.
Yeah, it'd be pragmatic. I mean, you just got him back from injury. Let's not have it happen again. And I think, yeah, I do very much like the Steelers' chances in this game to win it going away. Let's head on down to the AFC South. We've got Indianapolis going to Tennessee. The Titans 1.5-point dogs at home. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think the Titans last week they were able to especially with Derrick Henry's 2 touchdowns. That was basically the result of the Panthers not being able to move the ball at all. I understand that Minshew is limited and the Colts don't exactly have deep pass catching threats, but I still just kind of maybe this is stupid, but I trust Shane Steichen to come up with good ideas, and I feel like the Titans they have enough vulnerabilities, especially in the pass defense, that I feel like Steichen can find something that works here, even for Gardner Minshew. Even if the Colts can't play 4 wide, I just trust him to find some way. What I can't figure out the other side is, like, does Levis have anything really going for him, or is he kind of just like a stumbling goof who just sort of tags along with the baseline of the rest of the Titans team? It's like they're shellacking the Falcons. Maybe he's just getting in on the bonanza. And then last week's like the Panthers can't defend themselves. Maybe he's just kind of coasting on that. I can't tell if this is going to be that much more contested. Maybe in the trenches it's a little bit more contested, but those Colts outside corners are so busted right now that I don't know if Levis can screw it up, especially because, I mean, Hopkins, especially against these corners, I just don't know what the Colts can really do about that. Like, the Colts kind of need Levis to really turn into a total goofball here. And I don't know, it feels even as someone who thinks Levis is absolutely a goofball, that feels a little hasty to me. So I can't tell where I expect this one to go, but I definitely am more on the side of the Colts, I guess, just because I trust Steichen with Minshew more than I do anybody in particular with Levis, I suppose.
Yeah, I continue to be hesitant to buy in on this Indianapolis team as a playoff team, but at the same time, like, they keep winning, and the rest of the sort of like peripheral AFC contenders, your Bills, your Jets, now the Bengals, obviously with no Joe Burrow, it's like they're probably going to make the playoffs. Like,
that's crazy.
We're going to have to accept that at some point. And yet people are talking about the mediocre play taking over the league. But yeah, so interesting there. But I don't know. Tennessee at home has been tough. They're like 4-1 against the spread.
That's true.
At home. So that it's like, I don't know if that really, forebodes anything one way or the other. And they've been, terrible on the road, of course, too. So they're 2 extremes there. I probably still lean Indianapolis here, but it's tricky. And then beyond that, what are your expectations for Zach Moss in light of the Jonathan Taylor thumb injury?
Well, I think it must be the case that Moss was just a really, really, really bad fit for the Bills offense. I don't know how they managed to kind of keep him down the way that they did, but Moss has had enough productive games with the Colts going back to last year that even though he was lucky to get the last time these teams played, he was lucky to get that 60-yard touchdown or whatever. Moss is not going to be a 40+ yard carry kind of guy. He's going to get by more on grinding things out, which he's very good at. It suits him anyway, so it's fine. The Titans, though, just as like a pretty safe rule, will not defend the run as poorly as they did in that game. So right. The matchup's going to be tougher than a person would assume it was based on the last results. Like, he could, and he will get more attention. It's like there's a chance that the Titans kind of just overlooked him in that game. They might have thought like, oh, he's just that bum from Buffalo. We don't need to worry about him, and it's like wrong. It's Utah Zach Moss again. It's not Buffalo Bill Zach Moss. It's Utah Zach Moss, and that guy's good. So yeah, it's it's a tough setting for Moss, but I don't know. I think he's, at least in this scheme, he's the real deal, and he's had his durability troubles, but in terms of frame, he's built for volume. He can take a lot of carries and he can catch passes. He can play a lot of snaps, in the sense that he has the anchor and the density to kind of like get the better of a defense over the course of a game. Like he can wear a defense with his usage. And in this case, even if the Titans stop him for the first 15 carries, it's like maybe he gets to 21, 22 carries, and it's that last drive or two where he really starts to kind of like chip them away.
So we have him ranked as RB9 for this week. I think that's about right. But when he has the backfield to himself, he's a top 10 running back right now for fantasy. I think that's not too big of a stretch, and especially against the Titans. So I do like his outlook for this week. Before we get on over to our next game, we've got a message from our friends over at Splash. RotoWire is proud to partner with Splash Sports for the 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests at their style and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to a variety of playing styles such as DFS, Pickaxe, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sports books, Splash Sports pits you against your friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a place where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tier contests on Splash Sports all season. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash today. All right, onward. We've got the Dolphins and the Commanders. This one taking place in Washington. The Dolphins, 9.5-point favorites on the road. I'm not sure what to make of this one, but I'm after last week. Obviously, the Dolphins will be facing a much livelier offense than what they did against the Jets on Black Friday. But I feel like the Dolphins are still that team that if you're average or worse, they're going to take the Spurs to you pretty much. And I don't know if Washington is going to be able to really hold up over the course of this game. I think we could see another instance of tons of sacks and turnovers for this Washington offense, and they just get buried under an avalanche of Miami touchdowns.
Well, it really, really, really sucks how NFL owners are allowed to have these really clearly dangerous fields, and how when attention is brought to how there's all these needless injuries in the NFL as a result of these fields, which are dangerous because they are cheap compared to safer alternatives, we get, talk about the hip drop tackle instead of talking about how Jalen Phillips should just be playing this week. There never should have been an injury to him because of that stupid field, which never should have been on the ground. And without Jalen Phillips, the Dolphins defense loses a hell of a lot. So
right,
that I know Chubb's not bad or anything, but Phillips was the real juice in that pass rush. And now I don't know how they're going to, you can do simulated pressures and stuff. Vic Fangio certainly, he might be the best at that kind of stuff, but they're just that much more dependent on smoke and mirrors now. It's like that was some just raw firepower that Phillips gave them, and now they don't have that. So they're not as dangerous of a defense as they were last week. But with that said, yeah, I do wonder. I wonder if Fangio can be a pretty difficult coordinator for Howell in this Bieniemy offense to go against, because I guess I would expect the Dolphins just kind of put too high over the whole time and dare almost beg Washington to run the ball. And I don't think it's in Bieniemy's nature, most offensive coordinators' nature, to just say, okay, and then run the ball 8 times in a row until the defense plays differently. I think they want to throw the ball 40 times a game as an offense, that Washington does. So if you stick with that, I think it could kind of go wrong here. They might need to put the ball on the ground and get Fangio to loosen something up downfield, because I worry about Howell dropping back, thinking that one thing is going to happen after the snap, finding actually after the snap that Fangio has called a different coverage, and whatever way that it goes, it's like there's going to be guys downfield with their eyes on Howell. And at that point, I worry about either the sack happening because of him sort of correctly freezing at that, like he's not supposed to just throw it into that if he sees it, but where else is he supposed to go? Like there's check downs, I guess, to the running backs, but I don't know if they can really, again, much like the sticking with the running game, I don't know if they're going to really have the discipline to just keep taking that check down over and over and over.
Right.
And if they fall behind a little bit, all of these details can kind of snowball away from them and get worse yet. So with the Washington defense looking completely unserious, Jack Del Rio just such a clown, and I know it's not, he's not there, but Ron Rivera is such a clown too. Like, he's the one who stood by him all this time and has more or less overseen all these same things. Like, Ron Rivera is supposed to be a defensive head coach. If he doesn't have his hands on that defense all this time, what is he even doing? So I think that the defense stays crap because, as much as Del Rio was a joke, it's because he and Rivera are the same thing. And Mike McDaniel versus those ridiculous dinosaurs is the kind of thing that could truly get out of hand,
Yeah, he's going to run circles around Rivera. Jalen Waddle, had the big game last week. I think that, things set up pretty nicely for him. It's going to be hard to not stack the Dolphins this week in DFS. I mean, like, the only thing that's slowing you down is the price prohibitive nature of using all of Tua, Waddle, and Hill in one lineup.
Also, it might end up being one of those things like, Alabama versus whatever, Samford or something. And then, like, the second half, it's like, you see, like, there's 4 running backs who get 8 carries and 100 yards, something like that. River Craycraft scoring twice in the second half. That's the danger to the Dolphins' fantasy assets on offense.
So with that in mind, I mean, do you like Jeff Wilson this week, given that Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane are a little bit dinged up?
Yeah, I mean, him, even Salvin Ahmed might have been able to do. Wanted to see get a real shot in this offense, and he hasn't really. They might need to.
I apologize. I think I might have frozen up there for a second.
Oh, I probably did. Sorry, I or not that I have any idea how that would have happened. How long was I out, John? It was like 10 seconds or something?
Roughly 10 seconds or so, but I mean, we can press forward. I think we've gone ahead and summed up our feelings.
Somebody's going to run for the Dolphins. Somebody will.
You heard it here first, folks. But yes, I am sneaky interested in Jeff Wilson, pending the injury reports on Mostert and Achane for this week. Let's get on over to what honestly might be the best game of the early window, Broncos-Texans. We've got the Texans as 3.5-point favorites. The Texans obviously coming off the tough loss to the Jaguars, but that was a phenomenal game, I thought. Broncos were able to take care of business against a Deshaun Watson-less Browns team. They continue to roll here. This is a big test for, I think, the Broncos' viability and legitimacy, because they've been getting by on a rather soft part of their schedule, but they've been playing good teams close or beating them outright. I mean, the Chiefs and the Bills both over the last month or so. Just how for real are the Broncos?
I don't think they're real exactly, but we're at the very least seeing the extent to which last year's struggles were specifically related to Nate Hackett. And I know it started really bad with Sean Payton too. And I thought it looked like it looked almost for a moment as if Payton was doing just as badly as Hackett was. Those days are gone, at least. We've seen Sean Payton have his effect on the team. We're seeing how, these are not quite the clowns of last year. Like, they've got their limitations, sure, but this overt weekly embarrassment thing is over. And it's, I guess, if there's one single reason why, it's that Russell Wilson is efficient again. The volume is always a struggle with him. He can't drop back more than 30 times without getting sketchy. But Peyton figured that out, and Peyton's found a way to put Russell Wilson back into a role more analogous to what he had in Seattle when he was at his best. And it's like, look at that, 18 touchdowns to 5 interceptions after last year. It's like he probably would have been at like 18 and 14 at this point. So that's making them tough, and or tough enough anyway that the Texans have to actually play well. They're not going to get handed the game. So I expect the Texans to take care of business here. I think I don't know, the Jaguars. They have been disappointing for most of the year, but they were doing things a little differently last week, and I think we're basically a much tougher test than the Broncos. I think maybe the Texans aren't quite where they need to be to win the division, but teams like the Broncos, they should be able to take care of pretty easily.
All right. Well, all right. So that's a interesting enough take, and I feel like the Texans, oddly enough, have kind of warranted that level of respect at this point, where it's like, even if the Broncos, led by a veteran, former star quarterback, and ostensibly a good coach like Peyton, it's like, I don't like that for them against D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud, but that's
just the Texans can air it out. The Broncos really need to shorten the game. The Broncos need to keep the Texans from running 60 snaps, because if the Texans run that many snaps, it means that they've moved the chains that many more times and gotten that many more points. And again, once you get Russell Wilson to like 34 pass attempts, the wheels can fall off.
Yeah, I do think so as well. They've won the games that they have by establishing, dictating their tempo. Like they did that against the Chiefs, did that against the Bills, did that against the Vikings on that Sunday nighter a couple of weeks ago. Last week sort of does not super applicable just because of the quarterback play that Cleveland had on their side. But yeah, that's a really interesting detail as far as who can dictate the tempo, maybe coming out on top here. From a fantasy angle, looking a little bit, further afield, what's your temperature check on this Houston backfield right now?
It seems like it's got to be Singletary like 2/3 of the time. I don't really know, but him doing a lot as a pass catcher last week was interesting. I can't tell if that's sort of a feature that might be present going forward. Just like Zach Moss was kind of wasted in Buffalo, I think it's possible that Singletary was a little bit better than his numbers led to believe in Buffalo. So it's possible that the Texans can benefit, from Singletary like the Colts have Moss, which would be a new element, relative to when Pierce was running as the starter. So that's an interesting thing that could kind of change the whole complexion of the Texans offense. And I expect them to sort of pursue it, at least until Singletary screws something up, which he certainly hasn't.
No, he's been nails. Like, he's been such a key part of keeping a lot of my best ball teams afloat. And that was like a player that I would draft just out of sheer, oh God, I have 5 seconds left and I need a running back. And
this is the guy you picked when you're like, I don't have any good running backs. Crap. I guess I'll pick him.
Yeah, here's a hedge, and I hate it so much. And he's really, him and the old Gus Bus have bailed out many of what would otherwise be some pretty rough-looking best ball teams for me. So shout out to the motor himself, Devin Singletary, Florida Atlantic Owl legend. Hoo-hoo. Let's press on. So our official prediction before we press on, we like the Texans here.
Yeah, the more plays that get ran in this game, the better for the Texans. So if it's like 40 snaps that they log, then I'm worried about them.
Yeah. Okay. Well said. So yeah, lower the play count, up the variance, sort of the Service Academy model in the Broncos. Let's go to a game that I have no idea why is being played in the afternoon window, but we've got the Panthers and the Buccaneers, Mario. The Buccaneers at home, 4.5-point favorites. How about it?
The Buccaneers have had their struggles. Certainly, there's their ups and downs. That there's parts of their team that are just kind of ugly, mostly on offense, obviously. But actually, I don't even know if that's true. The defense has had some pretty ugly games too. I guess they might have excuse of injury in the secondary. But the Buccaneers, in any case, are one of those teams that clearly has more talent than the team they're playing this week. But they have so much just broad dysfunction on their roster. I can't tell if we need to worry about them kind of screwing up something, especially what if the Panthers, not that I expect this exactly, but what if they come out more motivated for the well, this isn't good for the guy for the chances of this. What is his? I can't remember the name of the interim guy. Tabor, is that what it was? Yeah, I don't even know who that is.
Oh
For
no.
a second, I was like, Tease Tabor, and I was like, no, this other guy. He's a special teams coach. It's like, oh, that's not as fun. So it is, it's possible that the Panthers have an Antonio Pierce like kind of thing. Sorry, you got to give me.
Oh, your Mario's co-host has or co-producer has taken over briefly as the U.S. Postal Service likely doing its job. So we will go ahead and press on.
Okay. Whatever
We're good.
storm was upsetting her has moved past. So sorry about Dual Say speaking up in the middle of that.
It's okay. We've had plenty of input from Bentley, the other co-producer.
Anyway,
well,
I think the stupid Buccaneers should be able to win this, but if they're sloppy and if they're getting like bogged down with turnovers and stuff like that, they could blow it. It's just it would require an incredibly low scoring game because there's nothing to fix with the Panthers offense. There's as much as I thought Reich is a bum, it's not his fault that offense was that bad, and there's just it's the players that's the problem.
There's like no good players on that offense. Like there no sort of bright spots. Adam Thielen was fun for a little while as like a resurgence. Like, oh hey, like that's sort of like found money in the first half of the season, but that's largely gone away as well. So
he's their only guy. The whole defense, it's like every defense just sells out to stop Adam Thielen. How ridiculous. I mean, it works because he's the only one and he's 33 or whatever. This isn't 5 years ago.
No, this is bleak stuff. But how does this game impact your like DFS approach for this particular slate? Like, are you interested in getting a lot of Evans and Godwin?
No, I think the Buccaneers have kind of screwed up Godwin a little bit by making him play outside with a quarterback who struggles to throw outside. With Mike Evans, it works fine with Mayfield because you can't miss him. It's difficult to miss Mike Evans. But with Godwin, it almost becomes a little bit more like the Odell Beckham thing. Like I think Baker Mayfield actually flinches a little bit when he sees a receiver start to get open. It's like he almost feels more comfortable knowing where the defender is and knowing that the defender is close because it's like I'm tossing it up to the big guy. Hopefully he gets it. With Godwin, I think he can feel that like I need to actually put the ball on a spot, and that's making me anxious. And it's or at least it's just not something he's as good at. So with Godwin moving out of the slot, they've made him less productive, and they make themselves more dependent on Mike Evans, who even at his best he will miss some targets. He'll drop some passes. So it's just easy. My paranoid version of this game for the Buccaneers is they end up in some needlessly difficult early situations because it's like a 3rd and 15. It's like Mike Evans drops a wide open pass and then they false start after that, and then Baker Mayfield throws a pick six. That's the way the Panthers need to win. So I don't see a whole. I guess aside from a Rashad White, I don't really see any fantasy utility in this game.
No, yeah, that's.
Evans, I should also mention, he's good and
automatic at this point. Yeah. But yeah, I think your point is well taken on what the structure of this Bucs offense looks like. Yeah, I wish that there was a little bit more ways to exploit this Panthers defense and the matchup generally, but the producers in this offense are so glaringly obvious that there's no real added analysis needed. We will hit one more. We're going to go slightly out of order here. Let's get Browns Rams out of the way before we talk about the main event of Sunday afternoon. But yes, Browns Rams playing a little bit better of late. How much are we buying it? They are 3.5-point favorites at home.
I don't know, man. I think the Rams are so confusing to me. Both of these teams are
I can't figure them out.
Both of these teams are a little confusing to me, but the Rams are a lot confusing to me. I don't understand why anything needs to be the way it always is with them. I guess it's good to see a game like last week where I know the passing game didn't do a whole lot, but to see the run game do that much, it seems like something they couldn't have done a couple of years ago or maybe, last year. And I wonder how much of it is just because of Steve Avila, who probably is one of the better guards already. I don't think even if Steve Avila and this offensive line are kind of rolling in the run game, the Browns defense is so much better against the run than the Cardinals that I still worry about Kyren Williams just immediately reverting to what Kyren Williams is anytime he's not playing the Cardinals, which is like a 3.8 yards per carry. Even for the year, even after that big game pass catching against the Cardinals, Kyren Williams' pass catching numbers are just abysmal. It's a lot of bad targets, I guess, in there, to be fair, but his catch rate, yards per target are still just basement level even after that big pass catching day against the Cardinals. So I'm mentioning all this just to say I don't think we can assume yardage comes from the running back position here. Like, the touchdowns could be there if the fields are short enough, and I expect them to be quite short given the quarterback situation for the Browns and how much better Stafford is than whatever the Browns do from this point is a huge, that's basically in itself a reason to think that the Rams take care of this pretty easily, just because it's hard to be competitive in the NFL when you're dealing with the very particular kind of bad that the Browns have at quarterback at the moment. It's just, it's not a thing that you can possibly win a whole lot of, even against, a team worse than the Rams.
Forgive my grin, and I think it's unlikely that he gets called up this week, but are you interested in seeing Joe Flacco going out there?
So this is for the Browns, right? That's why not? It'll be funnier than, if someone else were out there. It's
yes.
not. I don't like. It's not that I'm just watching in this case to see Joe Flacco suffer. I think the allure of Flacco is that he won't suffer. He will not let this become his problem. It's like he'll throw it a lot, but he's not really taking big hits. But he'll show up for the free sandwich or whatever.
Hell yeah, he will. And who among us wouldn't? But that's it. But to your point, this quarterback situation is very problematic for Cleveland. I do wonder if the defense might be gnarly enough to where it trips up the Rams. I never get the Rams right on a given week, so obviously take that with a grain of salt. But I kind of think Cleveland can go in there and cover a field goal.
If Joe Flacco starts at quarterback and wins that game, the way football and fantasy press work now, it's like he'd be 8th highest in MVP odds by Tuesday or something.
That is how they work, and boy, would they be justified.
He's good again.
Folks, we've turned back the clock, and Joe Cool is letting it rip. But beyond that, anything else to break down when it comes to the Rams receivers this week? And I also want to touch on one David Njoku, because Tyler Higbee, bad example. Never mind on the Tyler Higbee part. I should have brought that up in regards to Freiermuth earlier. Never mind.
Oh, well, Higbee, that was a weird thing last week. I don't know why. I don't know why with McVay and Higbee it always needs to be like it's either 8 weeks where he totals 200 yards, or it's 2 games where he totals 200 yards. There's never like a 50-yard game to be seen in between. It's just it's either he's doing what he did 3 years ago or whatever, where he has 700 yards in 6 weeks, or he's playing 90 snaps and he's getting 2 targets for 6 yards. And I don't understand on what basis any of these things shift. I don't know why it has to be those 2 ways and nothing in between, and I don't know why it goes either of the 2 ways it ever does. So I am not expecting Higbee to follow up with another big game here. Just because I don't know, it makes no sense to me. I can't anticipate it anyway. And you would think maybe more pass blocking to do than usual. I know that Myles Garrett is injured, but I don't know. It still seems like a tough front 7 on that defense, and Higbee might have to block more. Njoku, though, is interesting because I still think it's bizarre that they're using him as like a screen pass specialist, but they can't do anything else. And bless them, they're really doing it. They're giving him those targets. So Flacco, I think, would work fine with that. That's the kind of throw he's looking to make anyway. Like 3 yards within the line of scrimmage. Easy for him. No heat. So I think Njoku should still get a ton of targets. I guess I don't know what is he going to finish the year with? Like 6 yards a target, something like that.
Yeah, a little bit gross, a little bit inefficient as far as that goes. Let's get on to I would argue, the main event of this whole weekend, and one of the best games probably of the entire season. We've got a rematch of the NFC Championship game from a year ago, same place as well. The 49ers heading to the city of brotherly love to face the Eagles. Eagles 3-point dogs at home.
Huh.
How could it be?
Interesting. Well, I do think it's in a way it almost might help the Eagles that Dallas Goedert is out for this game, just because with Goddard out, the Eagles have just stopped playing with tight ends. A little bit of Jack Stoll, but they're running a lot of like 3-4 wide kind of stuff that they didn't run quite so much with Goddard on the field. And I think it's getting that third and fourth corner on the field that's key to beating the 49ers defense in a way. The base function of the Eagles offense of, Goddard and those two receivers, like those, oftentimes Stoll being the other, rather than a third receiver, it's oftentimes Stoll. And so that was the formation where it was especially reliably channeled through those two receivers, and then to a lesser extent Goddard, because there's literally not a fourth player running routes so much of the time. That's at once the way the Eagles wanted to run things, and I think is also the worst way to run things against the 49ers, because you want to make them show their corner depth, because they don't have it. When you make them only cover two receivers, they get better, because Fred Warner alone shuts down the middle of the field. He doesn't need help to do it. So if you run too wide, you're in effect risking both of those receivers getting doubled, and then Fred Warner just erasing everything in between. But if you go 3 receivers, 4 receivers, make them go to those corners that they've been benching and shuffling around, the Isaiah Olivers, the Ambry Thomases, those guys getting on the field and making them cover AJ Brown or Devontae Smith, or I don't know, anybody really. It's like that's how you get the 49ers uncomfortable on defense. And I don't know. I feel like Brian Johnson, this offensive coordinator for the Eagles, has done a lot of weird things, but it's mostly to do with personnel. Like I don't really have play calling gripes about what the Eagles are doing, aside from which players they choose to use at times. So if he were to come up with a good game plan for this game, that wouldn't be terribly shocking. I mean, I guess I would sooner expect he does a good job as far as that goes than the contrary. And if you can keep the 49ers defense from playing in that mode where they're just crashing downhill at you, that time, like those times where it feels like everybody's just in pursuit, like it doesn't seem like they're getting blocked. It's just everybody's pursuing. Like that's the result of letting them play downhill and play, see ball, get ball. So you have to change it from see ball, get ball to more like, where is the ball? Where is that guy going? Stuff like that to throw them off. And I think the more you spread them out, the more likely you are to shake them off of that, crashing downward rhythm that they otherwise are pretty good at setting.
I mean, that's fabulous analysis when it comes to the personnel and how, oddly enough, the Goddard injury, which theoretically would hurt the Eagles. And, it happened last year as well, I suppose, and Devontae Smith got better in that span. But how that pertains to the testing of this 49ers corner depth, I thought that was a fascinating point to be made. Olamide Zaccheaus.
Or Julio, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, or Julio. Something crazy like that. But beyond that, I mean, what do you make of the Eagles right now? Because the results obviously point to them being among the best teams in football, but the spread says the Niners are favored on the road here. So, I mean, where do you lean with that? I mean, at what point do we have to just admit, even if it's ugly, that the Eagles are probably the best team in football, or is Vegas right in saying that it's actually the Niners?
I have no idea. I have no theory as to why the spread is the way that it is. I think while the Eagles defense has looked worse than last year, specifically in the secondary it has, I feel like the exact same concerns apply to the 49ers defense for all those reasons that we were just saying. It's like they have worse corner depth than the Eagles, and the corners, the corner depth has largely been the problem for the Eagles this year on defense. So I see that, and then maybe I'm biased or whatever, but I don't think Brock Purdy is as good of a passer as Jalen Hurts. I think they're about equal as passers. And then Hurts is, of course, a pretty close to singular rushing threat in addition to that, whereas I think Purdy just like defers that slack to the rest of the 49ers offense, and they usually pick it up in large part because of Shanahan's play calling, keeping them in favorable situations with, open receivers and yards after the catch opportunities. So those things we might take for a given, and still I think I have trouble budgeting. I have trouble figuring out how we bridge that gap between Hurts and Purdy on their own. So maybe I'm overlooking. I think I'm not, though. I think you can acknowledge, as a Purdy kind of critic or skeptic, maybe I should say, that he's made a lot of big throws this year, but the way the conditions that are required for him to be in that position are not such a given. And I think when those conditions are denied to him, he can't make those throws anymore. And then in the situation where you cut off, Hurts from his go-to thing, it's like he's got the rushing threat to play off of. I don't think he is dependent on just getting bailed out the way that Purdy kind of is. So I guess, it should be a fine game for Purdy. It's just I wonder if maybe Vegas or anybody in particular might be underestimating the chances that the Eagles just kind of move the ball through the air in this game, just because, they've got so much firepower between AJ Brown and Devontae Smith alone. And every time where the 49ers struggled on defense this year, it was because of teams spreading them out and going through the air. And if you just take them out of their element that way, all these things that would otherwise, have a negative effect on the game, the Fred Warner, the run defense of the 49ers, the pass rush, it's like those things stop taking up as much room in the game calculus when you undermine it with spreading them out wide and throwing. So if the Eagles try, for instance, if the Eagles try to just go out and, establish the run and run into the teeth of the Fred Warner defense over and over, that would only work if the 49ers were basically like daring them to do it. If the 49ers were selling out against the pass, that's the only time that the Eagles should try to run. But if they don't try to force it otherwise, I just think, I don't know, AJ Brown plus the urgency of the situation, I feel like that's a tension that the 49ers don't want tested.
Has there been a common thread in your mind, in your opinion, between AJ Brown's kind of cold stretch that he's been on?
I mean, part of it was just kind of like the weather, I think, and the odd flow of that Chiefs game, and then the recent one, the Bills one, I have a little more difficulty, I guess, theorizing, because it Hurts didn't have the greatest numbers, I guess, in that one. He normally will complete well more than 58% of his passes, but anytime you're talking pass attempt volumes this little, and for instance, like the last 2 weeks, 53 pass attempts for Hurts, he almost had as many in week 6 alone. There was from weeks 3 to 6, Hurts was averaging 40 pass attempts a game. So 22 pass attempts in week 11 almost in itself can explain that game being down for AJ Brown. And then then last week it's like he gets 5 catches and a touchdown on 9 targets. It's like basically he had one game where Hurts didn't throw the ball half as much as he did at earlier points, and then there's a 4 target sample where Brown fluctuated below his standard returns. And usually anytime he fluctuates below his standard returns, all that happens in the future is a correction toward that higher initial point.
Sure. Okay. All right. Just wanted to get a little bit of clarity there. And then, I mean, you did touch on the idea that the Eagles defense might be one that has taken a step back a bit this year. I mean, where do their weak spots get exposed against the San Francisco offense?
Oddly, I feel like the 49ers and their tendencies on offense kind of not play into the hands of the Eagles on defense, but kind of lets the Eagles off the hook for their own lack of corner depth. Basically, with the 49ers, you're getting Ayuk, Kittle, Debo. And if there's another skill position player lined up, it's probably a fullback or another tight end, and one that doesn't draw targets, moreover. So with going against the 49ers as an opposing offense, the error is trying to play a big style of football, and run right into those two good corners. You want to get the third lesser corner on the field and go at him, basically. And with the Eagles, you want to do the same thing, but the 49ers don't really have the personnel to do it, or at least I don't really see it. They're more likely to just go with that big, bully style of play. And it's not going to put the Eagles in their most uncomfortable spot to have Slay on one side, Bradbury on the other, 2 safeties and 3 linebackers. Like if you make them respond with that personnel, I think you're sooner making them more comfortable. And I do think that's the kind of personnel that the 49ers normally, dictate with their own personnel usage. So I would, if anything, if I were Shanahan, I'd want to get that third corner on the field, but I guess I don't know if Jawan Jennings is an interesting player, but he's not one that they really can go to in a featured way. It's like he just he chips in. So Samuel and Ayuk in any case could see tougher matchups here than the Eagles wide receivers allowed numbers would indicate, because the wide receivers are pretty much raking against the Eagles in fantasy. I just happen to think a lot of it's like volume driven in this PPR era. And also some of those breakdowns in that coverage happened specifically before Bradley Roby was there, after the Avonte Maddox injury, when they were playing James Bradbury in the slot a bunch of times, which didn't suit him. So if you're letting Bradbury and Slay play outside, and if you don't have a third receiver threatening them, I think that's putting the Eagles defense at their best, basically.
The chat's calling you a hater, Mario.
Who am I hating now?
You hate the Niners.
Oh, yes. But I've hated every team at some point. Someone has told me at some point. So
that's true.
It's not me that's disagreeing. It's everybody else that's disagreeing with you guys. That's like, or my hate is more vast than you think, at least.
That's definitely true. And some good insights here in the chat from Matt. Kevin Byard playing a little bit better of late, so I mean that could
change
be an issue
a little,
for Kittle, So
I still like Kittle. I to be clear, Ayuk, Samuel, Kittle, you like a lot in this game because the 49ers have reason to use them. It's as simple as that. The question of whether they have enough to beat the some firepower of the Eagles on the other side is a different question. And so I'm just on the second thing. I'm not hating enough to say that you shouldn't like Kittle or the receivers, because you should like them for sure.
No, yeah, absolutely. You know what? In the end, I think the Niners go in and win. I think they make a little bit of a statement. I think that they've been rocket hot since the bye. They were rocket hot before their 3-game losing streak. The Eagles have obviously been impressive. They have great wins. They're 10-1. That they have what they call on Twitter. They've got the alligator blood. Like nothing seems to bother them. They can not be playing their best game. They hang around. They find a way to win. I think this is a week where it maybe comes crashing down a little bit for them. I think the Niners go in there, and it's not revenge because they don't get the NFC Championship out of this one, but I think they go in there and get this done.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I have no real leaning myself.
Other than 10 excellent minutes of analysis on the personnel and advantages and disadvantages in this game.
All of it to say it's hard for me to tell which way this goes. At the very least, I need more information about what are you Brian Johnson going to try to do on offense in this game? What are you Shanahan going to try to do? And but yeah, it's there's a lot up to them. I think both of those coaches in particular.
I can't wait to watch this game. I'm very, very excited to be a good one. Let's get on over. Chiefs-Packers, Sunday night, Lambeau Field. We've got the Chiefs as 6-point favorites on the road. Chiefs, they figured out how to score in the second half last week. The people were bugging them in the office all week about it. It's like, hey, dude, some of your second half scoring. They figured it out a little bit. All it took was playing the Raiders.
Didn't they? Wasn't it going into last week? They were down to like 5.8 points per second half or something like that, which is probably the lowest I've ever heard it for any team, let alone the Chiefs. That's just crazy.
Exactly. It was getting a little hairy there for a minute.
Wild. Yeah, because that's also so concerning because in other cases where Mahomes would struggle you'd rationalize it like, oh, but he'll figure it out over the course of the game. He's settling in. Yeah, these receivers suck, but he'll find a way to start pulling the strings of the defense. And instead, as games went along, they stopped doing even the little bit that they did at the first half, already a substandard mark. So on the one hand, the Chiefs have some real problems on offense. This is not just like, oh, we had a couple hiccups. It was an off day for us. It's like, no, your product is bad. And short of shaking up the names of the players on the field, you're just done. Like, you don't have anything. If you don't change something with the players, you're not going to find any way out of this. Particularly Justin Watson and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Like we've been saying all year, like they can't take as many targets on a per snap basis as you want to run pass attempts as an offense and still have it mathematically come out in any way that makes sense. It's just that the number that you need to hit for passing yardage, you can't get to anymore. And then what happens? You lose. Nothing good happens from that point. You don't just shrug and maybe it'll work out. It won't. And what we're seeing last week is it really was all this time as simple as you give more of those targets to Rashee Rice, and guess what? Literally, just like that, a lot of those problems go away. Not all of them. They still have things to figure out. But whereas previously, using this Justin Watson, Marquez Valdes-Scantling passing game, they were the worst second half offense in the league, and I assume going back like 10 years or something. Now they at least can beat the Raiders again, and they were showing they were really truly threatening us with something short of that, which is incredible.
It was hard to watch. I mean, they got shut down by a Denver defense twice that allowed 70 points to the Dolphins. It's like, I mean, of course there's probably some schematic and advantages plus Tyreek Hill on the side of the Dolphins, but come on, like not even close to the combined point. I mean, come on. So like you said, it was good to see Rashee Rice get more involved last week and have him be the instant offense that we've been looking for from that receiving core that, kind of cost them the game. Couples of different spots, of course.
Probably like 3 weeks already. Yeah.
Yeah. The Eagles game I thought was abysmal.
The Lions, I would largely blame on them. Stupid Kadarius Toney handing the ball off to Brian Branch. Like that's the game, even without Kelsey and Jones.
Mm-hmm. So what does it all mean? Like, do they take the right lessons away from last week against the Raiders and apply them against a Packers team that sneaky playing better of late?
Yeah, I think so. Not because I'm giving credit to Andy Reid for truly realizing it. I think it's just more that his hand has been forced. I don't think he really grasps the reason he was wrong before. I think he's probably seeing it more as like, good thing Rashee came through. We had to play him more. Good thing it worked out okay. And it's like, no, man, that's the whole crux of your problem right there, that you didn't put him on the field as much as you should have, as early as you should have. And the suffering between then and now was all needless. But I think it's difficult to put something like this back away, especially because they have no alternatives. It'd be one thing if Kadarius Toney had been the player they thought he would be. It'd be one thing if Sky Moore were capable of playing outside receiver.
Anything.
If the Chiefs take the ball away from Rice, they're back to the situation of like either Kelsey moves it or nobody does. And not every time will Kelsey be able to do it. So they're seeing how bad that can get. They're seeing just how diminished that return can get. And I think it's just the combination of the desperation and like the shortage of alternatives means they have to keep going to Rice. The one thing is we will see defenses adjust to Rice a little bit, if so, because it changes the complexion of like your game plan against this offense. I happen to think Rice can play outside just as easily in the slot, and I think he can make tons of plays downfield. I don't think he's an underneath yards after the catch merchant that he seems to be like pigeonholed as at the moment. I think he can play everywhere, and the sooner the Chiefs get their own game plan to accommodate him to that extent, the sooner they might be a real playoff team again.
Right. So that offense, we need to see more proof that they showed a little bit of something last week, but that they've established such a high baseline for themselves. It's like we got to see a little bit more consistency, but before we're ready to kind of have the same expectations that you've garnered over the last few years. And on the Packers side, I mean, they've won 2 straight. They've won 3 of their last 4. The one loss coming in a close one on the road at Pittsburgh. They made I thought, a pretty loud statement in Detroit last week on Thanksgiving. Jordan Love, in particular, throwing the 3 touchdowns that was very impressive stuff from him, completing about 70% of his passes in that one, not turning the ball over. That's been a consistent theme in the Packers' recent run of success. No turnovers or no interceptions specifically in those 3 wins, 2 picks in that one against the Steelers. Kansas City, of course, though, been playing pretty well defensively.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs' defense is way better than Detroit's. I think Detroit's pass defense in particular was not very good at any point this year. I think it would have been shown up more drastically if the schedule had gone a little differently. But those Green Bay receivers are talented, and as we could see, those Lions corners, there wasn't enough smoke and mirrors to cover them, and so those receivers got open. And the Lions don't have much of a pass rush. Aiden Hutchinson's gone really cold since week 3 or whatever, and no one else is stepping up. So I think what we saw with the Packers against the Lions was pretty much just what Jordan Love is capable of when he is playing with no pressure and his receivers are open all the time. And it's good that he did as well as he did. He certainly could have done worse. There are a lot of quarterbacks who could have done worse, but I don't see it as that clearly positive. I feel like it's more close to what he should be able to do and not really get a whole lot of praise for personally. So in any case, I worry about Love quite a lot going against this Chiefs defense. If the Chiefs defense doesn't kind of make things difficult on him, I think it's because they played a vanilla game plan on purpose, and they probably can do that and get away with it, in my opinion. I just think this defense is so much tougher than Detroit's that I feel like that alone kind of removes the Packers from competing here.
Okay, and then, as far as the run game is concerned, Aaron Jones doesn't play last week. Is there any way that the Packers can – I guess that's the problem here, is that it's all going to be on Jordan Love, right?
Right. I don't know the latest on Aaron Jones, but while it's easier probably to run on the Chiefs than to throw on them, that's only the case when they're kind of worried about the pass first, So if you're going out there, if Love struggles to throw the ball, if the Chiefs figure out he can't throw on us, in that case, I don't know if I like Aaron Jones because they're giving him more attention. But if it's not Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon, I don't know. I think at best he's kind of like a misfit for this offense. Maybe he needs to be in more of like a big I formation kind of offense. I also think he probably should lose a little muscle mass. But in any case, I don't trust him to take advantage of any given opportunity as much as Jones. And if Jones can't run wild, I just don't see where the Packers get their explosiveness from. They need the defense to rough up Mahomes and give them short fields, which I guess if the Chiefs go back to giving 14 targets combined to Justin Watson and whatever the other guy, Valdez-Scantling, if they do that, then maybe they can screw it up. But if they just kind of take the game seriously, I feel like the Packers, I think Love's going to really struggle against this defense.
Okay. All right. So that has deflated some of my optimism I had for the Packers going into this game. Your hard-hitting and sober analysis has made me reconsider my thoughts on this one.
I could be wrong. I mean, those receivers are good at the very. I don't mean to sound critical about them. Just
Sure.
Love, pretty much.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I suppose 3 good games is not enough to erase what had otherwise been kind of a not so great sample from him. Let's wrap it up. This game, not expected to be much of a game. Could have been a phenomenal game. Of course, I'm talking about the Jaguars and the Bengals. No Joe Burrow. As a result, the line movement has ballooned in favor of the Jaguars. Jags now a 9-point favorite, drawing 75% of the money on those bets. What did you see from Jake Browning last week, and what are sort of like the concrete ripple effects from Burrow's absence?
I don't know. He's not the best backup quarterback I've ever seen. They could do better. I don't know. They have some amount of pride still, I guess. Like they didn't come out and look completely disinterested or something, but I don't know. I think the spread's probably right on this one. You know, there's that Jaguars defense. It might be one of the 3 best in the league, something like that. It's almost certainly one of the 5 or 6 best in the league, and that's just that's like a category of difficulty for a quarterback like this. It just even if the Jags are going totally vanilla on the game plan, even if they're like, let's not show our tricks here, let's just get the W, go to next week. That still is a style of defense. Let's call it like a prevent kind of, you know, vanilla defense. Even that, I don't know if Browning can really do a whole lot with. So the run game probably taken away, both because it's generally sluggish for the Bengals and because the Jaguars effortlessly shut down the run. Browning in like 3rd and 9, you know, Browning in 3rd and 12. That sounds like it could get pretty bad. But the Jag side, I mean, I will have to lift the fatwa on Press Taylor if he keeps running the offense like the last 2 weeks, which is basically to say they're actually motioning Calvin Ridley and trying to engineer targets for him.
No, it's Zay Jones, Mario. It's all Zay
It's
Jones.
It's Zay Jones. But yeah, it's just so funny to like, wow, if you try to run a modern offense and try to do any of the things that any of the other offenses do to get their best players the ball, you try to do it with Ridley and his numbers get better. And then Trevor Lawrence's numbers get better. And you're like, what the hell? How did that happen? And you might, you know, after long meditation, if you're Press Taylor, if you think about it for a really long time, you probably got to do a montage to cover the amount of time that he's taking reflecting on this. You can realize like, oh, right, my best players should get the ball because they're better than the players who are worse than them. And then defenses don't want my best players to get the ball. So I should get them the ball all that much more therefore. And so after operating the first 10 weeks, they operated on the exact opposite principle. They were like, you challenged me by taking away my best player. I'll show you. I will, in a Zen-like calm fashion, divert the target to Jamal Agnew. They've switched it up, John. I'll give them credit. They've abandoned that plan, and they've gone toward like, let's get Ridley the ball. And you get Ridley going, everything else gets going because everything else gets loosened up from the defense. You know, Evan Ingram all of a sudden has a step more on his routes. Everybody's getting open more. Lawrence finally produces the way he should have all along. And yeah, Lawrence, he should have been on that 5,000 yard, 40 touchdown pace all along. Like this shouldn't have been such a challenging season.
I know. And he's also run in, I think, 3 touchdowns over the last 2 games.
He's already about at last year's 17-game rushing total. And yeah, I can't tell how much of that is him going like, no one's open, you know, screw it. I'm interested to see if they can get the yardage numbers more like the last 2 weeks and keep Lawrence on like a 400, 500 yard rushing course. Because that level of volume would make them a very dangerous team.
Yes, he can run. I can still see him running that touchdown against Ohio State all those years ago. Yeah, he's an athlete in addition to being an insanely talented quarterback. So, yeah, I think this sets up extremely well for him, the rest of that offense. And I guess closing out my point on the Bengals, yeah, I thought that looking at last week's game, a bit of a glimpse of what you can expect for fantasy purposes going forward. I think Jamar Chase is still someone that you can start. Joe Mixon, it's going to be matchup dependent. And I think in this matchup, if you have better options or better matchups, like I would not play Joe Mixon against this defense this week. And I think, you know, your more tertiary options like your T. Higgins, your Tyler Boyds, they pretty much hit the bench for the rest of the season, I think.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's matchup dependent even for Mixon. Like you see some analysis saying, "Oh, well, he gets a bigger share of the offense now. This is actually okay." Like, well, it's not going to be okay when they get 3 first downs in a game.
Yeah, he had 2 yards per carry last week. Like a big share of like 30 plays on offense. Like big whoop.
Yeah, that's the way it might go again here.
I think so too. So we unfortunately will be treated to another kind of not so great Monday Night Football matchup, but hey, it is football at the end of the day. That's going to wrap it up for us here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast for Week 13. Really appreciate everyone chiming in the comments section with your questions and hater accusations. We appreciate all of them. And thanks again to our sponsors over at Circa, over at Splash, and over at Blue Wire. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening, and go Dogs.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/try.